Shabbos, Parak Yud Gimel, Mishnah Daled, 13:4. We now move on to some other malachas that are precursors that precede weaving. You have to first make your raw wool that you sheared into thread. And there are four processes that we'll discuss that are malachas in this Mishnah, which are malabin, menapetz, tzoveya, and toveh. I'll go through each one separately in a moment. And the point of the Mishnah is the shiur, as we've been going through all other malachas. What is the requisite amount of wool that you are malabin, menapetz, tzoveya, or toveh, at which point you will be liable to bring a chatas. So for all of these malachas, the shiur is going to be what's called a malo rochav hasit kaful, which means a sit is the distance between your middle finger, that's your amma in Hebrew, and your index finger, that's your etzba in Hebrew. Those are the two fingers closest to your thumb. So if you spread those two fingers apart as far as possible, the distance between them is called a sit in Hebrew. And the Mishnah's point here is that the shiur for those four malachas is to produce, if you do those malachas in order to produce enough thread to make a string that is twice the distance of a sit, a double sit, in other words, at that point you'll be chayav. So the Mishnah's words read, shiur hamalabin v'hamanapetz v'tzoveya v'toveh, the requisite amount that one would have to do of malabin, menapetz, tzoveya, and toveh, again I'll explain what those are, is kamalo rochav hasit kaful, is the full width of a double sit. That much wool processed any of those four ways would be the malacha d'oraisa for which one would be liable. Now let's go through those malachas one more time here. We saw them back in the 7th parak, but let's do it one more time in a little more depth here. First is malabin. So this is the malacha that occurs after you shear the wool from the sheep. Malabin literally means whitening. And there are two basic sheets in the Rishonim on what malabin is. According to Rashi, this is cleaning it with water. So there are basically two steps in that process. The first is after you shear off the wool from the sheep, the wool is really matted and filthy. It's a bit on the, you see humans with dreadlocks. Well, these are sheep that are walking with their hair uncombed, unshorn, and close to the ground, sleeping in animal dung and insects and burrs and all the rest of it. So the amount of debris is large, and you have to wash out as much as you can before processing these hair fibers into thread. So according to Rashi, malabin is essentially scouring. There's two parts to it. The first is you essentially put it under a running stream and try to get out the kind of equivalent of running water under a sink for us, and use that to try to wash out as much of the debris as possible. There's also a second part, which is you're going to wash it in like a tub that has a detergent inside of it. Neser, which is nitar, was a common detergent they used, and the idea here is that you need to get all the grease out of the wool. It's not going to take the dye very well if it's still greasy, etc. And in normal circumstances, therefore, you want to wash it and get as much of the oil and grease out as possible. So malabin is scouring, according to Rashi. According to the Rabbi, malabin is something else. Malabin is essentially bleaching, so it's not done with water. Malabin is done in an oven. You'll take wet wool, and then you'll put it in an oven where you're heating the oven on the inside by burning sulfur. The sulfur in the air will combine with oxygen in the air to make sulfur dioxide, which will then combine with the water inside the wool to make what's called sulfurous acid. That's H2SO3. And then the sulfurous acid will take on more oxygen to really bleach the